The message arrived on a Tuesday. At first, it was nothing more than strange patterns on the deep space monitoring screens at the Global Space Command Center. The technicians thought it was a glitch, a random burst of cosmic radiation. But when the patterns repeated exactly 7 times, everyone knew it was something else entirely. Captain James Reed was eating lunch when the call came. A tall man with weathered features and steady hands, he had commanded Earth's modest defense fleet for 5 years. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this day. "Sir, you need to come to the command center immediately," said the voice on the other end. "We're receiving a transmission. Not from Earth. Not from any of our outposts." Reed arrived to find the center in controlled chaos. Screens displayed the decrypted message in plain text. "Attention inhabitants of Sol 3. The Galactic Empire requests your immediate attention. Prepare for arrival. Coordinates follow." "How long do we have?" Reed asked the head analyst. "Based on these coordinates, 3 days, sir." Reed nodded calmly, though his heart raced. "Contact all world leaders. We need a unified response." For 3 days, Earth prepared. Military forces went on high alert. Scientists worked around the clock to understand what little data they had. Regular people looked up at the stars and wondered if their lives would ever be the same. On the 3rd day they came. It began as a shimmer in the sky, visible even in daylight. Then massive shapes appeared in orbit. 12 ships, each larger than the biggest city on Earth. Their design was elegant yet threatening, with smooth curved lines ending in sharp points. They were beautiful in the way predators are beautiful. The largest ship sent a smaller vessel toward Earth. It landed precisely in the neutral territory designated by Earth's United Governments, a flat plain outside the old United Nations headquarters. Captain Reed stood with a small welcoming committee as the ship's door opened. A ramp extended, and down walked creatures that looked almost human, but not quite. They stood taller, with skin that had a faint bluish tint and eyes that seemed to see more than human eyes could. Their leader stepped forward. "I am Admiral Dorn of the Galactic Empire. We come in peace, to welcome your world into our protection." Reed extended his hand in greeting. "Captain James Reed, representing Earth's Defense Force. We welcome peaceful contact." Admiral Dorn looked at Reed's hand, but did not take it. Instead, he smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "Your primitive customs are charming," Dorn said. "Let us discuss matters of importance. The Empire spans 1,000 star systems. We bring order, advancement, and protection. In return, we require only loyalty and resources." The meetings lasted 2 days. Earth's leaders presented their world as an independent planet interested in galactic friendship, not subjugation. Admiral Dorn listened politely, but grew increasingly impatient. On the 3rd day, he revealed the Empire's true face. "You misunderstand," Dorn said coldly. "This is not a negotiation between equals. The Empire does not request, it commands. You will become a vassal world, providing tribute and obeying imperial law, or you will be made an example of." Reed stood firm. "Earth is home to 8 billion people with their own cultures and systems. We're willing to establish trade and diplomatic relations, but we will not surrender our sovereignty." Admiral Dorn's expression hardened. "You have 1 week to reconsider. When I return, I expect your full submission." He turned to leave, then paused. "To help you understand the seriousness of our request." He pressed a button on his wrist device. On all screens in the room appeared an image of Earth's small research outpost on Mars. A beam of light shot down from one of the Imperial ships. The outpost vanished in a flash of light. 1 week, Dorn repeated, walking back to his ship. As the alien vessel lifted off, Reed looked at the shocked faces around him. "Get me secure communications," he said quietly. "We need to prepare." The clock was ticking. The world leaders gathered in an underground bunker, their faces grim. Above them, 12 massive Imperial ships loomed in Earth's orbit like silent predators. They destroyed our Mars outpost with a single shot, said President Laura Grant, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. 37 people, gone in an instant. Captain Reed stood at the front of the room, beside a holographic display showing the Imperial fleet. "We have 6 days left," he said, "and we need every hour." The room erupted in arguments. Some leaders wanted immediate surrender to save lives. Others called for desperate attacks against the vastly superior force. "Enough," President Grant's voice cut through the chaos. "We need information before we decide anything." That's when Dr. Anna Miller stepped forward. Short and intense, with quick eyes that missed nothing. She was Earth's leading expert on alien biology. "I've analyzed the data from our brief contact," she said. "The Empire's species has a respiratory system that processes nitrogen differently than ours. They're vulnerable to certain compounds that wouldn't harm humans." Hope flickered in the room, but Reed shook his head. "That might help in ground combat, but their ships could destroy our cities from orbit. We need more." As if answering his plea, the door burst open. Lieutenant Tom Wilson stumbled in, his uniform torn and bloody, but his eyes bright with triumph. "Sir, I made it," he gasped. "Our stealth team infiltrated one of their scout ships. Most of my team didn't make it, but we got this." He placed a small device on the table. It projected detailed schematics of Imperial ships, weapons systems, and communications protocols. "Their technology is advanced, but not as alien as we feared," Wilson explained. "They use energy shields that cycle every 3.7 seconds. There's a millisecond gap between cycles." Reed studied the data, his mind racing with possibilities. "If we can time our attacks to hit during that gap." The meeting continued through the night. By morning, they had a plan. Not a perfect one, but a chance. That afternoon, Admiral Dorn sent a message. "As a reminder of the consequences of defiance, we will demonstrate our power." The smallest Imperial ship moved into position over Earth's moon. A beam of energy shot down, and a crater appeared where the lunar mining colony had been. 500 people lost in seconds. Dr. Miller watched the footage, her hands clenched into fists. "They're trying to break our will." Reed nodded. "Instead, they've just shown us exactly how their weapons work." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. On the surface, world governments appeared to be preparing surrender documents. News reports spoke of peaceful transition and galactic cooperation. But beneath the surface, humanity prepared for war. In hidden facilities around the world, weapons were modified based on the stolen Imperial data. Dr. Miller's team produced enough of her special compound to deploy worldwide. Pilots trained in simulators programmed with the Imperial ship's specifications. On the 6th day, Admiral Dorn's shuttle landed again. This time, he brought a squad of Imperial soldiers, their armor gleaming in the sunlight. "Your time is up," he announced. "Has Earth reached the correct decision?" President Grant stepped forward, a document case in her hands. "We have," she said. "Earth has considered your offer carefully." Dorn smiled, satisfaction clear on his face. "The Emperor will be pleased by your wisdom." Grant opened the case and removed an official-looking document. Admiral Dorn reached for it, but she held it back. "Before we proceed," she said, "I have a question. In your vast empire, have you ever encountered a species that refused to submit?" Dorn laughed. "A few. They are no longer among the living." President Grant nodded slowly. "I suspected as much." She handed the document to Captain Reed. "This isn't a surrender," Reed said, his voice clear and strong. "It's a declaration of terms. Earth demands recognition as a sovereign planet with full rights." Dorn's face darkened with anger. "You dare to make demands? Your primitive planet will be reduced to ash." "Perhaps," said Grant calmly, "but we will not kneel." As Dorn stormed back to his shuttle, Lieutenant Wilson whispered to Reed, "He doesn't know what we've prepared." Reed watched the Imperial shuttle rise toward the waiting fleet. "No," he said softly. "He doesn't. The ultimatum had been delivered, not by the Empire, but by humanity. 20 years before the Empire arrived, humanity had its first alien encounter. It wasn't as dramatic as movies had predicted, just a small crashed scout ship in the Siberian wilderness. The 3 alien occupants didn't survive, but their technology changed everything. Professor Mark Davis remembered that day clearly. He had been a young researcher then, one of the first scientists allowed to examine the wreckage. Now his hair was gray and his face lined, but his eyes still lit up when he thought about what they had learned. The Empire thinks we're defenseless, he told the assembled military leaders in the underground command center. That's our advantage. After that first crash, governments around the world had secretly agreed to hide humanity's technological leaps. Official records showed modest advances in computing and energy production. What remained hidden were the quantum leap breakthroughs in shield technology, weapons systems, and propulsion. "Show them," Captain Reed instructed. Professor Davis pressed a button on his tablet. The wall slid open, revealing a massive hangar. Inside stood rows of sleek fighter craft unlike anything publicly known to exist on Earth. They incorporated design elements clearly inspired by alien technology, but with uniquely human adaptations. "The Phoenix Squadron," Davis said with pride. 200 ships, each capable of both atmospheric and space combat. Their hulls contain materials reverse-engineered from the Siberian crash. They can withstand direct hits from energy weapons similar to what the Empire uses. President Grant walked along the line of fighters, her hand brushing against the cool metal of the nearest ship. "How many pilots do we have trained on these?" she asked. 300, Reed answered. "We've been running the program in secret for years, recruiting the best pilots and training them in underground facilities." Lieutenant Wilson stood before a massive holographic display showing Earth's complete defensive capabilities. Icons representing hidden missile silos, orbital platforms disguised as communication satellites, and underwater bases appeared one by one. "The Empire's scans would have detected our official military bases," Wilson explained, "but our most advanced weapons and systems are shielded from their scanning technology." Dr. Miller joined them, carrying a sealed container. "And we have this," she said, placing it carefully on the central table. "The Achilles compound. Based on my analysis of their biology, this will incapacitate their ground forces without harming humans." Reed nodded grimly. "Distribution systems are in place in all major cities. If they attempt a ground invasion, we can deploy it within minutes." In another part of the facility, technicians monitored communications from the Imperial fleet. Admiral Dorn was reporting back to his superiors. "The humans are primitive and disorganized." His translated voice came through clearly. "They have rejected our offer of protection, but they pose no threat. Standard subjugation protocols will be sufficient." The technicians exchanged knowing glances. Let the Empire underestimate them. It would be their downfall. Back in the main command center, President Grant addressed the gathered leaders. "For 20 years, we kept these advances secret," she said, "not just from our own people, but from watching eyes among the stars. We hoped we would never need these weapons. But now, I'm grateful for the foresight of those who came before us." She turned to Captain Reed. "How long until they attack?" "Based on their communications, they're following standard procedures. They'll begin with targeted strikes on our military installations to demonstrate their power. Then they'll demand surrender again before launching a full assault. And our planetary shield." Professor Davis smiled slightly. "Ready to activate on your command, Madam President. It will be the first surprise of many." Around the world, similar scenes played out in hidden facilities. Soldiers prepared specialized weapons. Scientists made final adjustments to defensive systems. Pilots ran last-minute simulations. Admiral Dorn might have reported to his emperor that Earth would fall easily, but humanity had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone knew. As the Imperial fleet moved into attack formation, Captain Reed looked at the readiness reports flowing in from around the globe. "They think they're dealing with a primitive species," he said quietly. They're about to learn how wrong they are. President Grant straightened her shoulders. It's time to show the Empire exactly who they threatened. The hidden strength of humanity was about to be revealed. The Empire's attack began at dawn. Massive ships positioned themselves over major military installations around the world. Citizens watched in horror as energy beams lanced down from the sky, creating explosions visible for miles. But something strange happened. When the smoke cleared, the targets remained intact. In the Global Command Center, President Grant watched the confused communications from the Imperial fleet. Admiral Dorn's voice was sharp with disbelief. Repeat firing sequence. Maximum power. The beams struck again, more intense than before. The protective shield that covered Earth flickered briefly, becoming visible as a shimmering dome of energy before fading back to invisibility. Shield holding at 92% capacity, reported the chief technician. The Empire's weapons are powerful, but not as strong as we feared. Professor Davis nodded with satisfaction. 20 years of preparation, worth every moment. President Grant turned to Captain Reed. Is everything in place? Yes, Madam President. All nations are coordinated. The Phoenix Squadron is ready. Our orbital platforms are charged and awaiting your command. Grant looked at the faces around her. Scientists, military leaders, and representatives from every nation on Earth. For the first time in human history, the entire planet stood united against a common threat. Prepare the broadcast, she ordered. Within minutes, every screen on Earth, from television sets to phone displays, showed the same image. President Laura Grant standing before the flags of all nations. Citizens of Earth, she began, her voice calm but resolute. As you have witnessed, we are under attack by an alien force calling themselves the Galactic Empire. They came to our world demanding our surrender and our servitude. When we refused, they attacked. The camera pulled back to show the Imperial ships visible through a large window behind her. For generations, humanity has wondered if we were alone in the universe. Now we know we are not. And we also know that there are those among the stars who would take our freedom from us. In orbit, Admiral Dorn watched the broadcast with growing anger. This is meaningless posturing, he told his officers. Increase attack power. Target their population centers next. Back on Earth, President Grant continued. Today, I speak not just as the leader of one nation, but as a representative of all humanity. We have a message for the Empire. She paused, her gaze steady and direct. We, the people of Earth, formally declare war against the Galactic Empire. We reject your demands of submission. We refuse your claim over our world, and we will fight to protect our freedom with every resource at our command. On the Imperial command ship, Admiral Dorn laughed. A declaration of war. From primitives, their arrogance is almost admirable. His second-in-command looked less certain. Sir, our weapons had no effect. A lucky defense, Dorn dismissed. Proceed with the invasion plan. Launch the first wave of ground forces. In the command center, President Grant gave a simple nod. Captain Reed pressed a button on his console. Phoenix Squadron, you are clear for launch. Godspeed. Around the world, hidden hangar doors slid open. Mountains seemingly split apart, revealing launch bays. Underground facilities released squadrons of fighters unlike anything publicly known to exist on Earth. 200 ships rose into the sky, their advanced engines nearly silent. They accelerated upward at speeds that defied conventional physics, heading straight for the Imperial fleet. Admiral Dorn was about to give another order when alarms blared throughout his ship. Sir, multiple craft approaching. They're coming from the planet. Impossible, Dorn snapped. Their technology is nowhere near advanced enough for space combat. But the evidence was on his screens. Earth ships, moving with incredible speed and precision, were engaging his fleet. This cannot be, Dorn shouted as the first Imperial ship exploded under concentrated fire from the Earth defenders. On Earth, President Grant watched the battle unfold on the command center's main screen. "The Empire made a critical mistake," she said quietly. "They judged us by what we showed the world, not by what we kept hidden." The Phoenix Squadron swept through the Imperial formation, their smaller size allowing them to outmaneuver the massive alien ships. Where the Empire had expected an easy victory, they found themselves in a fight for survival. The moment humanity declared war on the Empire wasn't just a statement. It was the beginning of a battle that would change the galaxy forever. Commander John Stone had never felt more alive. His Phoenix fighter cut through space like a knife, weaving between massive Imperial ships with impossible grace. Phoenix leader to all units, he called through his communication system. "Remember your training. Hit and fade. Don't give them time to lock on." 200 Earth fighters swarmed around the Imperial fleet. They were smaller than the alien vessels, but far more agile. Where Imperial ships relied on overwhelming firepower, the Phoenix Squadron used speed and precision. "Target their sensor arrays," Stone ordered. "Blind them first." In the Imperial command ship, chaos reigned. Admiral Dorn slammed his fist against a control panel, his face twisted with rage. "How is this possible?" he shouted. "These humans were supposed to be primitive." His tactical officer looked up from a damaged console, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Sir, they're not fighting like primitives. They're targeting specific systems, sensors, weapons, engines. They know our weaknesses." Dorn's eyes narrowed. "The scout ship," he hissed. "They must have captured one of our scout ships." A massive explosion rocked the command vessel. 3 of the smaller Imperial ships had already been destroyed, their burning hulks drifting through space. "Sir," called an officer, "the humans are deploying some kind of missile platforms in orbit." On the main screen, Dorn watched as dozens of satellites that had appeared to be simple communication devices suddenly transformed, revealing powerful weapons that began firing on his fleet. In Earth's command center, Captain Reed monitored the battle alongside Professor Davis and Dr. Miller. "First wave is performing better than expected," Reed reported to President Grant. "We've destroyed 3 Imperial ships and damaged 7 more. Our losses are minimal." Grant nodded, her face solemn. "And our cities?" "The shield is holding," Professor Davis said proudly. "They've tried to target major population centers, but they can't get through." Meanwhile, in space, Commander Stone led his squadron in another attack run. His targeting computer locked onto an Imperial ship's main engine. "Phoenix 3 and 4, with me," he ordered. "We're going for the power core." 3 Earth fighters dove toward the enemy vessel, dodging energy blasts that lit up the darkness of space. They fired in perfect coordination, their weapons striking the same spot at the same time. The Imperial ship's engine exploded in a blinding flash. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as systems overloaded. Within moments, the massive vessel was breaking apart. "Keep pushing," Stone called to his pilots. "Don't give them time to regroup." The Phoenix Squadron wasn't just fighting. They were dancing. Years of secret training had prepared them for this moment. They moved as one force, striking with surgical precision before vanishing into the black. On his command ship, Admiral Dorn finally understood the gravity of his situation. What should have been a simple subjugation had turned into a disaster. "Defensive formation," he ordered. "Protect the command ship at all costs, and send the distress signal." His communications officer hesitated. "Sir, calling for help will be seen as weakness." Dorn's eyes flashed dangerously. "Send it now, or I'll find someone who will." The signal went out, racing across space toward the heart of the Empire. Back on Earth, the mood in the command center was cautiously optimistic. They had surprised the Empire and drawn first blood. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. "They're regrouping," Reed observed, studying the tactical display. "And they've sent a signal out of our system." President Grant's expression remained steady. "They're calling for reinforcements." "Yes," Reed confirmed. Based on what we've learned about their FTL capabilities, we have 4 days before more Imperial ships arrive. Grant turned to the assembled leaders. Then we have 4 days to press our advantage. Commander Stone's forces have shown the Empire is not invincible. Now we take the fight to them. Dr. Miller stepped forward. The biological agent is ready. If they attempt a ground invasion, we can deploy it immediately. Reed nodded, and Lieutenant Wilson's team is standing by for the boarding operation. Outside, citizens watched in awe as distant flashes lit up the night sky, the signs of battle in Earth's orbit. After generations of looking up at the stars and wondering, humanity had finally met another civilization, not as friends or partners, but as warriors defending their home. Commander Stone's voice crackled over the command center speakers. Phoenix leader to command. 2 more Imperial ships disabled. We're pressing forward. The first strike had been delivered. Earth had shown its teeth, and the Empire was bleeding. 3 days after Earth's first strike, the reinforcements arrived. Not a small relief force as humanity had hoped, but a massive armada led by General Krell, the Empire's most decorated military commander. "I want that planet turned to glass," Krell ordered as his fleet exited faster than light travel near Jupiter. Tall and scarred, with cold eyes that had watched 100 worlds fall, he was not accustomed to failure. "Admiral Dorn has proven himself incompetent," he told his officers. "We will show these humans the true might of the Empire." Earth's long-range sensors detected the new fleet immediately. In the command center, the mood darkened as the numbers appeared on screen. 50 ships, Captain Reed said grimly, much larger than the first wave. President Grant studied the tactical display. "How long until they reach Earth?" 6 hours at their current speed, Reed replied. "Our pilots are exhausted, and we've lost 37 Phoenix fighters already." Professor Davis stepped forward. "The planetary shield won't hold against that many ships firing simultaneously. We need another strategy." Lieutenant Wilson, freshly returned from his daring raid on an Imperial vessel, joined the conversation. "We captured something on our mission that might help." He placed a small device on the table. "They're complete communication protocols and encryption codes." Reed's eyes widened. "You mean we can listen to everything they say, maybe even send false orders?" Wilson nodded. "Exactly." As General Krell's fleet approached, Earth prepared its desperate defense. Phoenix squadron pilots returned to their cockpits despite their exhaustion. The remaining orbital platforms were charged to maximum capacity, and in cities around the world, Dr. Miller's biological agent was loaded into distribution systems. The battle began with a ferocity that dwarfed the previous engagement. Imperial ships filled the sky, their weapons creating a web of destructive energy that hammered the planetary shield. "Shield at 60% and falling," reported a technician, her voice tight with tension. Commander Stone led his remaining fighters in desperate attacks against the overwhelming force. "Target their lead ships," he ordered. "We need to disrupt their formation." But the Imperial fleet was too large, too powerful. Earth fighters fell one by one, unable to penetrate the enemy's defensive screen. In the command center, alarms blared as the shield's integrity dropped further. 45%, 38%, 30%. The numbers fell rapidly. "They're breaking through," Reed said. "Prepare for ground defense." The shield failed in multiple locations. Imperial landing craft surged through the gaps, heading toward major cities. Soldiers poured out, their weapons ready, expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they met humanity's hidden strength. As soon as the first Imperial boots touched Earth soil, Dr. Miller's command went out. "Deploy the agent." Around the world, fine mists were released into the air near landing zones. The Empire's troops advanced confidently until the coughing began. Within minutes, entire squads were incapacitated, their respiratory systems unable to process the specially designed compound. "Ground forces are contained," Dr. Miller reported, "but the fleet is still breaking through our defenses." That's when Lieutenant Wilson enacted his daring plan. Using the stolen communication codes, his team transmitted false orders to selected Imperial ships. Confusion spread through the enemy fleet as vessels suddenly changed course, some even firing on their companions. General Krell is not falling for it, Reed observed. His command ship is still leading the attack. President Grant made a difficult decision. Activate Project Spear. Hidden missile silos around the world opened. Earth's most powerful weapons, combining human ingenuity with reverse-engineered alien technology, launched toward the Imperial fleet. General Krell saw the missiles too late. Evasive maneuvers, he shouted, but the weapons moved with impossible speed. The explosions in orbit were visible from the ground, bright new stars that flared and died in seconds. Krell's flagship took 3 direct hits, its hull breaching in multiple places. As the battle raged, Lieutenant Wilson led a small team on the most dangerous mission yet, boarding General Krell's damaged ship. Using the confusion of battle as cover, they infiltrated the vessel, fighting their way toward the command center. Earth's forces were taking heavy losses, but they were inflicting significant damage on the Empire. For the first time in centuries, an Imperial fleet faced defeat. In his shattered command center, General Krell faced the unthinkable. He opened a secure channel to the Empire's homeworld. "This is General Krell," he said, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "Send the Emperor's Guard. Send everything." The turning point had come. Earth had bloodied the Empire's nose. Now, the real war would begin. The Emperor himself arrived 3 weeks later. His ship dwarfed all others, a mountain of metal and energy that cast a shadow over half the continent below. It came alone, without the expected armada. In the command center, Earth's leaders watched with confusion. A single ship. Captain Reed frowned at the display. "After General Krell's defeat, I expected their entire fleet." President Grant studied the massive vessel. "Perhaps this is a diplomatic approach." Their question was answered when the Emperor's ship unleashed a barrage unlike anything they had seen. The planetary shield, recently repaired, flared bright blue across the entire sky before collapsing completely. "Shield failure in all sectors," Professor Davis reported, his fingers dancing across controls in a desperate attempt to restore protection. The Emperor's voice boomed through every communication device on Earth, a deep, resonant sound that carried absolute authority. "I am Emperor Vox, ruler of 1,000 worlds. You have destroyed my ships. You have killed my soldiers. This defiance ends today." In orbit, Lieutenant Wilson and his team watched from their captured Imperial cruiser. They had survived their mission to board General Krell's flagship, escaping with both valuable intelligence and the ship itself. Now they faced the Emperor's wrath along with the rest of humanity. "Sir, look." Wilson's second-in-command pointed to their scanner. "Something's happening at the edge of the system." Space itself seemed to ripple as ships began to appear, dozens at first, then hundreds. But they weren't Imperial vessels. Those designs. Wilson leaned forward, studying the newcomers. "They're all different." On Earth, the command center erupted with reports of the mysterious fleet. President Grant turned to Dr. Miller in confusion. "Who are they?" "More enemies." Dr. Miller smiled for the first time in days. "Not enemies. Allies." She activated a communication channel. "The signal is broadcasting as planned." They received our message. The largest of the new ships moved forward. Its captain appeared on screens across Earth, a being with 4 arms and iridescent skin. "People of Earth, I am Captain Zenith of Proxima. We heard your call. Like you, our world was once threatened by the Empire. Unlike you, we submitted. We have lived under Imperial rule for 3 centuries. Today, we choose to stand with you in freedom." More transmissions followed. Species after species, each once conquered by the Empire, declaring their support for Earth's resistance. The Emperor's voice cut through the declarations, cold with fury. "This treachery will not stand. All who oppose the Empire will be destroyed." His massive ship fired again, targeting Earth's remaining defenses. Buildings crumbled, Phoenix Squadron fighters fell from the sky. It seemed nothing could stop the Emperor's rage. Then Lieutenant Wilson made his move. The captured Imperial cruiser accelerated toward the Emperor's vessel, transmitting identification codes stolen during their raid. "They think we're friendly," Wilson told his crew. "Get ready to deploy the package." As they approached, Professor Davis' voice came through their communications. "Remember, you must place it directly on their main power coupling. Nothing else will penetrate their shields." Wilson nodded grimly. "Understood." Their small ship docked with the Emperor's massive vessel. While Imperial systems verified their credentials, Wilson's team moved quickly, placing the device in the critical location before racing back to their ship. They were halfway to safety when alarms blared throughout the Emperor's vessel. "Intruder alert. Security breach in power section." Wilson pushed their engines beyond safe limits. "We need distance." Now, behind them, the device activated. It wasn't a conventional weapon, but something far more elegant, a cascade failure that turned the Emperor's own power system against his ship. Energy surged uncontrolled through the massive vessel. Systems overloaded. Backup safeguards failed. The Emperor's invincible flagship began to tear itself apart from within. As the Emperor's ship collapsed in a spectacular display of light and destruction, the rebel fleet engaged the remaining Imperial forces. Ships that had served the Empire for centuries now turned their weapons against their former masters. On Earth, people emerged from shelters to see the battle raging in the sky above. President Grant addressed the planet once more. "Today marks not just Earth's victory, but the beginning of freedom for countless worlds. Together, we have proven that even the mightiest empire can fall when people stand united against tyranny." Captain Reed joined her, looking up at the fading explosions. "What happens now?" "Now," Grant said thoughtfully, "we help build something better. Not an empire, but an alliance. Not subjects, but partners." Among the stars, Lieutenant Wilson watched as former Imperial vessels lowered their weapons. The ships of a dozen different species moved into defensive positions around Earth. Humanity had not just survived its first interstellar war. It had sparked a revolution that would reshape the galaxy. The moment humanity declared war on the Empire became the moment that freedom returned to the stars.